What really happened behind the scenes of Bonanza, and why did Dan Blocker's son wait nearly 5 decades to reveal the truth? At 67, he's finally breaking his silence, and what he shares will change everything you thought you knew about his father's legacy. From untold struggles to jaw-dropping secret, this is the moment fans have been waiting for. Stick around, because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. There's something about childhood silence that lingers, like a storm building just beyond the horizon. For 53 years, Dirk Blocker kept a storm of his own sealed tight. He was only 14 when his father, Dan Blocker, passed suddenly in 1972. The world knew Dan as the warm-hearted Hoss Cartwright from Bonanza, but for Dirk, he was simply Dad, now a memory frozen in time. Only recently, at age 67, Dirk broke his silence, and the emotional weight of his words has fans shaken. He opened up about what it was really like growing up in the long shadow of a TV legend. From crowded grocery stores swarmed with fans to birthdays overshadowed by filming schedules, Dirk reveals a bittersweet legacy, one few could have imagined behind the fame. Dan Blocker's origin story is as outsized as the man himself. Born on December 10, 1928 in DeKalb, Texas, he didn't exactly sneak into the world. He arrived with thunder. Weighing a staggering 14 pounds, his birth became instant small-town folklore. So much so, his name was accidentally written as Bobby Dawn, instead of Bobby Dan Davis Blocker on the official paper. His mother Mary endured a delivery still whispered about in Bowie County, while his father Shaq probably had no idea that their newborn giant would one day become an American icon. That birth record stood unbeaten for decades. By age 6, Dan's world shifted when the family relocated to O'Donnell, a tight-knit farming town still mourning the recent loss of Dan's older sister, Virginia, who had passed from illness at just 11. Dan, only 5 at the time, carried the grief quietly. The Blockers opened a grocery store, and life went on, because it had to. Dan grew up stacking cattle feed and bagging groceries by the time he hit 5th grade, already stronger than boys twice his age. His early years weren't just about chores. They were the beginning of something unshakable. Locals remember him as the big kid, but he wasn't just big, he was powerful. By age 10, he was 5 feet tall and weighed 105 pounds. At 12, he'd already shot up to 6 feet and 200 pounds. By 13, Main Street became his boxing ring, where he took on men in their 20s and walked away unbeaten. One story tells of him lifting a car off a man pinned beneath it. Maybe exaggerated, maybe not, but no one ever doubted his strength. In high school, he stood 6 feet 4 inches, weighed 275 pounds, and wore size 14.5 shoes. His father used to joke that he was too big to ride and too small to pull a wagon, useless in theory, unstoppable in practice. Seeking discipline, his parents enrolled him in the Texas Military Institute, the same school that once molded General MacArthur. There, Dan's natural grit met structure. After graduating in 1946, he enrolled at Hardin-Simmons University and joined the football team. Built like a fortress, he was a natural fit. But destiny had a plot twist. In 1947, he transferred to Sul Ross State and stumbled into theater by accident, literally helping lift props backstage for a play. That simple act shifted his universe. The stage drew him in, and just like that, Dan dropped his physical education major and pursued drama. He still played football, worked rodeos, and bounced at bars to stay afloat, but acting filled his soul. Teachers and classmates noticed his rare mix of physical strength and emotional depth. In 1950, he earned his degree in speech and drama, turning down offers from football teams and boxing promoters. He wanted more than muscle, he wanted meaning. That same year, he ventured to Boston for summer stock theater, acting in rotating weekly plays for mere scrap. It was brutal, but he loved every moment. But just as the curtain was rising on his acting career, another stage called, this time halfway across the world. In November 1950, Dan was drafted into the Army during the Korean War. Finding gear for a man his size wasn't easy. It took weeks just to locate boots that fit. After training in Louisiana, he was shipped to Japan, then directly to the Korean front line. Standing tall at 6 feet 4 inches, he earned the nickname the Big Un from his unit, and not just for his size, but for how he carried himself under fire. Combat in Korea was harrowing. Dan's unit was sent to the frigid trenches along the Jamestown line, where frost-bitten silence was often broken by gunfire. Promotions came quickly, private to corporal, then sergeant, and finally master sergeant. His natural leadership couldn't be ignored. Christmas Eve 1951 tested every ounce of his resolve, as he and his squad were trapped on Hill 255 for 10 agonizing hours. Then came the assault on Hill 200, where casualties mounted. Dan was wounded trying to save others, a selfless act that earned him the Purple Heart and a deeper understanding of the human cost of conflict. After 209 days in active combat, Blocker came home, changed. His wartime experiences haunted him, and he became a vocal critic of later conflict, especially the war in Vietnam. He had lived the chaos and wanted no more innocent suffering. Yet, what war broke down, it also revealed. Blocker could lead in darkness. He directed patrols under fire, walked into ambushes, and somehow brought his men back. His bravery was honored with multiple medals, from the Korean Service Medal with 2 campaign stars to the Combat Infantryman Badge. In September 1952, Dan's military service ended. Just 2 days later, he married Dolia Lee Parker, the woman who'd received his letters during the darkest days of war. Their wedding was small, held in Carlsbad, New Mexico, but their bond was unbreakable. That very week, Dan returned to Sul Ross State to finish what he started, earning a master's degree in drama. To make ends meet, he became a high school teacher in Sonora, Texas, where his voice boomed through classrooms and students clung to every word of Shakespeare he delivered. Even in the classroom, he was a performer, but his heart still longed for something more. Then came a moment wrapped in fate, a summer vacation trip to Hollywood. They weren't looking for opportunity. It was just a family road trip. But sometimes the road you think you're just passing through is the one you were always meant to walk. He didn't look like he was trying to be discovered. He was just a tall Texan in cowboy boots, standing at a payphone, probably calling home about errands or plans for dinner. But fate, it seems, doesn't send invitations. It just walks up and taps you on the shoulder. That's exactly what happened when a talent agent saw Dan Blocker, towering at 6'4", dressed like he'd walked straight off the set of a Western. He didn't need lines or a headshot, just one look, and the agent knew. This man was television gold. Blocker's wife and kids waited in the station wagon nearby, unaware that this one moment was about to reroute their entire future. Hollywood in the late 50s was obsessed with cowboy, grit, dust, honor. And here stood a man who looked like he lived it. Blocker didn't even move to California for stardom. He had a PhD in mind, not a saddle. It was 1956, and he'd come to UCLA to study education. While pursuing that dream, he taught school in Glendale and supported his growing family. He and his wife had 4 kids, twin daughters, then 2 sons. Life was structured, busy, grounded. But sometimes the stars shine brightest when they aren't even trying. That giant frame of his? It wasn't just imposing, it was unforgettable. In 1957, he popped up as a monster in a Three Stooges sci-fi short called Outer Space Jitter. Credited as Don Blocker, buried in alien makeup, he wasn't chasing prestige. He was getting by. Just a 17-minute film, shot in 2 days, but it showed something key. Blocker was willing to lean into the absurd, use his size, and make people laugh. That same year, he took small parts in westerns, often unrecognizable in makeup or costume. He was a bartender in The Sheriff of Cochise, a cavalry lieutenant in Gunsmoke, each role different, each one just a stepping stone. In 1957 alone, he crisscrossed TV westerns like a journeyman, The Rifleman, Cheyenne, Colt .45. He played lawmen, blacksmith, cattlemen, sometimes the hero, sometimes the brute. The roles weren't glamorous, but he made himself memorable. That deep voice, that steady presence. And then came a part that began to shift everything. Maverick. He played Hognose Hugh, a role that finally allowed Blocker to mix comedy with strength. That unexpected balance, that ability to be both tough and endearing, caught Hollywood off guard. It wasn't just about size anymore. Producers saw potential for something deeper, something more human. It was this moment, this role, that would pave the way for the character who would make him a household name, Hoss Cartwright. The producers of Bonanza weren't even looking at anyone else. The moment they imagined Hoss, they saw Dan Blocker. And once the cameras started rolling, they knew they were right. At first, the show didn't take off. It limped in at number 45 in the rating. But slowly, Bonanza found its rhythm. And Blocker? He became the heart of it. Originally written as a comic sidekick, Big, slow, mostly silent, Hoss could have been a one-note character, but Blocker wasn't interested in playing dumb. He infused Hoss with kindness, curiosity, and heart. A man of 365 pounds with a master's degree, he brought depth to a character meant to be overlooked, and the audience noticed. But behind the charm of the show was a grueling schedule. While modern series get away with a dozen episodes a season, Bonanza was producing over 30 a year. 5-day week, 14-hour shoots, in layers of wool and leather, on horseback, in the California heat. It was punishing, especially for a man Blocker's size. He'd sometimes collapse from exhaustion, but he kept going. He once admitted he spent more time with the Bonanza cast than his own family. Still, by 1972, he had appeared in a staggering 415 episodes. That kind of commitment reshaped television history. And yet, there was a cost. Before all this, Blocker dreamed of something entirely different. He was a teacher. He taught English, directed school plays, and connected with students in a way only someone truly passionate could. He came to California for a PhD, not for stardom. Even after being cast in Bonanza, he kept going to class for a while, trying to balance both. But the demands of the show eventually took over. Long days, tight script, endless interviews. It left no space for study, and though he never complained, he once confessed that not finishing his PhD remained his deepest regret. Still, what he gave instead was unforgettable. Hoss wasn't just entertainment, he was comfort. During the turbulent 1960s, when the world felt divided, people turned on their TVs to watch a man who believed in kindness, in decency, in doing what was right. Studies even revealed that viewers saw Hoss as the emotional center of the show. Blocker once said he played the character with one thought in mind: if there is any kindness we can show, let us do it now, for we may never pass this way again. It wasn't just a line, it was how he lived, on screen and off. By the mid-1960s, Bonanza had become a cultural institution. At its peak, nearly 19 million households were tuning in every Sunday night. That's a 36% share of the nation's televisions. The Cartwrights weren't just TV characters. They were part of the family in homes across America and beyond. From Brazil to Thailand, from France to Saudi Arabia, the show reached viewers in nearly 50 countries. The only show that managed to shake its dominance for a while? The Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Even the legendary Judy Garland couldn't dethrone it. But Blocker wasn't content to stay just a TV hero. In 1963, as Bonanza was riding high, he opened a steakhouse, the Bonanza Sirloin Pit, in Westport, Connecticut. It was housed in a former Greyhound bus station, and the concept clicked. People trusted the name. Within a few years, the brand took off. By 1989, the merged Bonanza and Ponderosa chains had hundreds of locations. By 2019, just a few dozen remained, but the legacy lingered. Blocker had done something rare. He turned fame into something tangible, something lasting, not just in hearts and on screens, but in real places where people gathered, shared meals, and remembered a man who had once simply stopped to make a phone call. Behind the scenes, Blocker's life was surprisingly grounded. While millions tuned in weekly to see him as Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza, at home he was just Dad. During the show's golden years, all 4 of his kids took karate classes from none other than Chuck Norris, long before Norris became a household name. And it wasn't just Blocker's children. Michael Landon's kids trained alongside them. The cast wasn't just close, they were family. He'd married his college sweetheart, Dolia Parker, in 1952. Their union lasted until the day he died, a rarity in the glitzy chaos of Hollywood. Their son David would later go on to win an Emmy, while Dirk followed in his father's acting footsteps. The Blocker home was filled with love, loyalty, and a firm grip on reality. Fame never managed to steal that from them. Yet beneath Dan's booming laugh and on-screen warmth, his body was quietly betraying him. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches and weighing around 300 pounds, Dan was a formidable figure. But size, which gave him his screen presence, came with silent risk. In the final stretch of his life, he began battling gallbladder issue. He brushed it off, kept it quiet, just like a cowboy would. Those close to him had no idea how serious things were getting. He had just been cast in what could have been a career-defining role in Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye, playing a disillusioned, alcoholic writer. It was dark, raw, and utterly unlike anything he'd done before. This was his shot to step out of the shadow of Hoss Cartwright and into something grittier. But time ran out. 2 months before production began, Dan was gone. The role was given to Sterling Hayden, who delivered a brilliant, unpredictable performance. Still, Altman couldn't shake the feeling of what could have been. A tribute to Dan in the film's credits whispered what the cast and crew already knew. This was a loss that echoed far beyond the frame. In the early hours of May 13, 1972, what began as a standard gallbladder surgery turned tragic. Dan developed a pulmonary embolism and passed away at just 43. It was fast, merciless, and devastating. His wife Dolia, left to raise 4 children, twins Deborah and Dana, and sons David and Dirk, was suddenly thrust into the public eye. Just 3 days later, a sea of mourners gathered to say goodbye. Michael Landon's heartfelt tribute pierced through the grief. He made us laugh. He made us better. That one sentence carried the weight of a legacy. The ripple of Dan's passing shook Bonanza to its core. Though the show tried to push on into a 14th season, the absence of Hoss was impossible to ignore. Ratings dropped by nearly 40%. NBC blamed it on a scheduling shift, but the audience knew better. Without Hoss, Bonanza had lost its soul. Even Lorne Greene, the show's patriarch Ben Cartwright, admitted to his wife, "That's it, it's finished." And he was right. NBC pulled the plug in November. The final episode aired just weeks later. Today, in the small Texas town of O'Donnell, his memory lives on. A bronze bust watches over the town square, a lasting tribute to the man the world knew as Hoss. The plaque says it best. Thanks to film, Hoss Cartwright will live, but all too seldom does the world get to keep a Dan Blocker. Across the street, the O'Donnell Heritage Museum holds an entire room filled with memories, including the fact that Dan, born as Bobby Dan, was the biggest baby ever recorded in Bowie County at 14 pounds. These hometown details paint a different picture of the legend, less about the screen, more about the soul. Dirk Blocker, his son, lived through the shadow of that giant legacy. At just 14, when he lost his father, Dirk found his own path. At 16, he was already acting. By 19, he had a regular TV role, but it was his later years that brought his full-circle moment. As Detective Hitchcock on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Dirk spent nearly a decade making a new name for himself. Now 66, he reflects not on the fame, but on the man who once tucked him in at night, before transforming into a legend by morning. Dirk has revealed the strange duality of growing up with a famous father, seeing him revered by strangers, while remembering the man who shared Sunday breakfast. He chose a quieter route in Hollywood, favoring supporting roles over spotlight-stealing ones. That quiet strength mirrored his father's dignity, a strength that still moves audiences today. And what about Dan's lifestyle? The hidden empire behind the gentle cowboy. While never flashy, Dan Blocker invested wisely. He owned multiple properties, including a ranch in California, and maintained a stable of classic American cars, known to favor a sleek Lincoln Continental. His watch collection was subtle, yet refined, often seen wearing Omega or vintage Bulova pieces. Though not as extravagant as modern stars, he was protected. Dan carried insurance for his acting contract, health coverage specific to high-risk physical conditions, and life insurance to secure his family. His investments included early television syndication stake and small ventures in Texas real estate. The lesson here? It's not about how much you spend, it's how wisely you protect and grow it. Dan Blocker quietly built a safety net that allowed his family to heal and thrive after he was gone. So if there's one final thought to leave with, it's this: legends aren't just made on screen. They're built in the quiet choices, the loyalty to family, the love shared off camera, and the battles no one ever sees. Dan Blocker lived that truth, and thanks to those who carry his name and memory, he still rides on. If you felt that, drop a like, share your thoughts below, and hit subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.